Someone sent in another Screen Rant article, and this one is on the 12 most overrated movies that everyone pretends to love. Now that is a provocative title. Fun detail on this one is that the guy that wrote this article, I just kind of looked up on Twitter real quick, and he follows me. So kind of fun that someone that follows me were reacting to their article on here. But on this was like, these are always inherently designed to step on toes. And that's what people want. What's your most overrated movies? What do you think's overrated? And so you pick movies that to even be considered for the list, they have to be films that a lot of people love. So immediately it's designed to step on toes. Then from there, this was probably the editor added this detail, but that everyone pretends to love. This is where you start to learn the tricks of copywriting and designing headlines. You want like a twofer in there where it's an inherently provocative concept and then add something emotionally charged, because the first part we're attacking the movies that are highly separated. The second part that you guys pretend to love. So as you're reading it, it feels like a personal attack. So are these movies overrated? How wild and crazy is this list? Everybody get ready, put on your steel-toed boots, because this article is about to start stepping on some toes. First up on the list, Fight Club. Fight Club. And there's a lot of about how there's good ideas in here, but the central idea, the execution isn't even close to some of David Fincher's other work. And Fight Club is one of those films that became a cult classic because it feels more provocative. Woo! Right out of the gate, we are mashing on some toes. I will totally disagree on this one. Perhaps some of it is that Fight Club, one of the things that was so special about the film was that it was able to tap into that era's alienated youth of these 20-somethings, these people that were emerging, that were directionless, did not have purpose. That's what the movie is all about. And so people without purpose long for purpose, and they find it in the mission of Tyler Durden. And I was when it came out, I was still in high school, but right as I graduated high school is when all of us started watching it. It came out on DVD and everything like that. And it tapped into that. And we didn't fully understand the movie, and so we're just doing fight clubs in the backyard to celebrate Fight Club. But it actually tapped into something. It connected with what people were feeling at a moment in time. And so does that fully translate if you weren't there, if you weren't in that moment? And this discussion of all these boys raised by women, the children of a generation of divorce, like that was the generation that like I was emerging from, and it got it. It articulated it, and in this crazy stylized world. So totally disagree with this one. And I think even kind of the read on it, that it's just because it's provocative is what people liked. I think that is not a great read on everything kind of going on with it. Next one on here, not quite as universal of a film that's kind of stood the test of time in the same way. The Notebook. This was one of those movies 20 years ago that was just incredibly popular, and it made Nicholas Sparks' books become incredibly, they were already popular, but even more so to the extent that I even read the actual book of The Notebook. I was dating my wife when this movie first came out, and so we would do like DVD dates where we'd call each other on the phone, and we'd start The Notebook on our DVD players at the same time so we could have our own epic love story. Was it overrated? Has it stood the test of time? No, it hasn't. But so I've struggled to call it overrated because I just don't think it's in the same category as most of the other movies on this list. But, it was a star-making movie for Rachel McAdams and Ryan Gosling. It had its important impact, but, if anyone's trying to compare to the other movies on this list, of course it's just lesser. It's not in that same category. So I don't know if it's overrated. I just don't know that it stood the test of time. Oh, Next one on the list, Jaws. Whoa, he is just going for it, right? Like, just like, pick on the Notebook. There's not a lot of people that are going to come after you. You pick on Jaws, the movie that invented the blockbuster. So kind of that's a little bit of his argument, is that it reinvented the concept of the summer blockbuster. And so it, changed the industry. But he's like, it's hard to take the special effects seriously today. And when it's reviewed outside of the context of the cultural boom, the movie struggles to keep up with modern disaster flicks. I mean, I just think that's a bad way to view historic films, though. Well, I mean, can this movie from 50 years ago keep up with a modern disaster film? No. Also, modern disaster films don't have characters that are nearly as compelling. It doesn't have nearly as tight of a script. It doesn't have the wit. And so, it doesn't compete with them because it's not trying to compete with them on their levels. It's competing with them on its own levels, which is to say, it's just a better made film. It's not a 21st century spectacle film. It's just not that. Movies like this aren't made anymore. And what was thrilling 50 years ago is not what's thrilling now. All that's true, but that doesn't mean that Jaws is overrated or anything like that. It means that you're evaluating the film on the wrong standards. These special effects don't hold up. Yeah, but that's not, who cares? That's like, if you're locked in on that, you're locking in on the wrong things, because the character's plot, all that is very compelling. The thrills still work, even if the shark doesn't necessarily look great. But they're putting out a Superman movie in 6 months, and we're looking at the trailer for that being like, I don't know if this flight looks great. We say that about everything. We complain about VFX on every movie, besides like Dune and Jurassic Park and Terminator 2. Number 9, Chinatown. I have to sit this one out. This one is a film that I have not seen, so can't chime in on it. Got to sit that one out. We'll skip over it, so this will just be a top 11 list. And what you're going to find out on this list is that he hardcore goes after the Trinity of 1994. He goes after all 3 movies in the Trinity: Forrest Gump, Shawshank, and Pulp Fiction. Maybe I'm confusing my list. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be I'm combining my list together. I read these 2 lists, so maybe I need to edit this out if I clip it out. But he goes after those 1994 picks. So Forrest Gump won Best Picture in 1994, and that has been heavily debated ever since, because you did have Shawshank and Pulp Fiction. Time has been friendlier to those movies than to Forrest Gump. Does that mean that Forrest Gump is overrated? I don't think Forrest Gump is overrated. I rewatched it 4 or 5 years back, and I loved it when it first came out, and it was one of the first prestige movies I ever saw in the theater. Rewatching it, it was still funny. It was still heartwarming, poignant, and you pick up on so many different things. Like Lieutenant Dan's low key has one of the best character arcs in cinematic history. There's all these things that you pick up on later in life. Is it overly sentimental? Is it maybe not to everyone's taste? And it sure, is it a overly nostalgic view of history? Maybe, but it's a movie that cut through. I can't call my wife Jenny because of this movie. The movie came out 30 years ago, and you still can't call her Jenny because everyone called her Jenny back in the 90s. It was just a movie that had an impact. So the idea everyone's pretending to love it, what are you talking about? It's funny, it's has characters that you like, and it's super quotable. The Shining. I think I've never fully understood The Shining and The Shining love. So I guess I'll agree. This one is overrated. There's elements to it that I get. There's things in it, in the production and the technique, and that Kubrick's brilliance and all of that. And then there's just some random things in it that are I don't know why there's the teddy bear in the hotel room, and the part where they had the epic journey of a guy to come save the day, for that to go nowhere whatsoever very quickly. There's things in it that I just never fully understood. Even the end of it, they changed the end from the book. The book ends with a bang. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. And they end this one in like such an intentionally anticlimactic fashion with how it's resolved. So, you know, I think it's very well made. I just have never fully understood how much love the Shining gets. But I've also always said that I'm not on Kubrick's wavelength. Then we have Avatar. So, Avatar is the highest grossing movie of all time. But it's also a movie with like the strangest relationship to the public. Because it obviously has fans and certainly got people to show up, and they showed up for the sequel. And whenever I say things like, I don't know who's like super pumped for Avatar 2 and 3, people come out of nowhere like, I adore Avatar. Right here. We got a little bit of love immediately popping up. I love Avatar. But it's never broken into the popular culture as a franchise the way that most of the other big sci-fi franchises have. That you don't, there's not like the big gigantic hit Avatar video game. I believe there's an Avatar video game, but it's not like that was an event thing. It's not like kids love to get Avatar toys and all this, the pop culture, the merchandising, the expanded, the ways that most franchises expand in their fandom, cosplay. You just don't see that for Avatar. So it's like one of the most interesting franchises because they're true cinematic like behemoths. Just 2 movies and they've made $5 billion and it's its own original franchise. Like this, it's so unprecedented. But when George Lucas invented Star Wars and had this unprecedented successful original world, they sold a zillion toys and it led to all these books and all this other stuff. And it, you know, that's everybody's, you know, this favorite thing that kids still love to this day. And Avatar just didn't do that and hasn't done that. That's fascinating. But I think that Avatar 1 and 2 are of the real James Cameron movies, James Cameron's weakest films, because Avatar, it's Dances with Wolves, Pocahontas, Ferngully, Last Samurai, any number of one of these former soldier goes primitive stories. It follows it beat by beat. I think it's a great cinematic experience. It's a thrilling film, but it's his least interesting movie by far. So yeah, I think Avatar, but it's overrated based off of its box office, but it's not overrated based off of the chatter that it has. So it's such a unique thing that I don't understand it at all. And I think it's so strange that the connection there. Like, CM Waters says nobody even pretends to love Avatar. And first up, right, this comment is right after someone says one comment, I love Avatar. The next comment, nobody even pretends to love Avatar. So there are a few people that say that they love Avatar, but right, like it's not the same way that people love Xenomorphs in the Alien franchise or Predators, Star Wars, Avatar: The Last Airbender, all these Pokemon, like people love these things. There's not that same love for Avatar, but it made $3 billion. All right, next one on here, The Greatest Showman. I think this is another one where I kind of, you have to define terms a little bit. This is like its own version of like a cult film or a niche film that I think if you talk to a lot of average like people that aren't into like musicals and stuff, like, oh yeah, Greatest Showman, I saw that when it came out. My girlfriend showed it to me or whatever. They'd be kind of like that. People that like musicals are obsessed with The Greatest Showman. Like my wife, she'll pick like one movie per year to frequently musicals, and she'll just go see it every single week and take all of her friends to go see it. That's what she did with The Greatest Showman. We went to go see it. And then the next week she went with one of her friends, and the next week she went with a different friend. And that's how she relates to movies. Like that's not what I do. That's how she does it. And Greatest Showman was that movie. And then she listened to the soundtrack all the time, bought it as soon as she could, and rewatched it all the time. And she showed it to our girls 2 weeks ago. I rewatched it 2 weeks ago, and the songs are great. The cast are all very energetic. It's a bit of an odd film because it's like montage the movie. It's like just montaging everything that it does. So it's kind of an interesting experience. I'm like, okay, it's kind of cool. But the people that love it really do love it. They are obsessed with it. But it's a niche thing. Like it's its own kind of, it's like the theater kid people. Like they truly love it. So in that regard, is it overrated? No. But you have to keep in mind it's niche. It's not, it's its own, like a lot of these are interesting the way that people relate to them, where Avatar sold 5 billion tickets, but it doesn't have a rabid fan base. Greatest Showman is not doing nearly as much business. It's not beloved by everyone, but the people that liked it loved it. And they didn't see it once. They saw it 5 times in the theater. Frozen. Oh, this guy must not have kids. Jack must not have daughters, because I got 2 daughters and both of them went through a Frozen phase, and then they went through another Frozen phase. And I've got well, I've got multiple nieces, but have a niece that's starting her Frozen phase. Like Frozen absolutely has a zillion little girls that love it. And the songs, of course, are great. You can debate the quality of the story in each film, but both movies have fantastic music. And then really fun side characters with like Olaf, and even like they did like the Olaf Presents, where he retells the plot of Disney movies. Super funny. We've watched those so many times. So Frozen, I think in a certain way, the movies are better than their plots. Like the characters, the songs, the charm, the dynamics, the world elevate them in a way that I think there's a way in which you could say that they're overrated because like the weird nature of some of the stuff here. But people absolutely like. I got 2 little girls, and we've got Frozen lunchboxes. We got the hair pieces, all the stuff. Like they have their own little Elsa braid they put in their hair. Whenever Chloe took piano for a little bit, she was learning Some Things Never Change on the piano. Yeah. People love that one. Oh! Silence of the Lambs. Whoa, what is the argument? What is it? What does he say here? Has several amazing moments. Cast is great. Many people love Silence of the Lambs' creepy performance. It's easy to forget he actually doesn't have that much screen time at all. Like, right. But I think that's the point of why this argument is probably kind of dubious, that people love the movie despite the character that's most famous isn't in it very much. The majority of the runtime is taken by a mystery that isn't anywhere near as compelling. Buffalo Bill, what are you talking about? Like that's what makes the movie actually great, is that you're invested in this investigation, and the side character is so good. With 12 minutes of screen, he's so good. But there's all this other stuff where the investigation is good. Buffalo, like, she rubs the lotion into her skin, or else she gets the hose again. The dance sequence, well, I don't want to say too much. You know, where he's dancing and what he does in that one. Like, all this other stuff is also very memorable outside of Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal Lecter just happens to be that great. That's where you take a movie that was great and make it Best Picture, where everything elevates it. But like also, even like the gender dynamics with her showing up and everyone discredits her. So no, Silence of the Lambs is fantastic. It's not just a movie that was popular because of Lecter and the sequels and everything. Like, it literally won Best Picture. Like, this is a movie that was a hit film. Critics loved it, the Academy loved it, and it spawned multiple sequels, prequel, TV show. So, oh man, what are we talking about? Of course, Silence of the Lambs is great. Return of the Jedi. I'm not going to say it's overrated. I think there are a lot of. It's actually kind of an interesting one. Like with Star Wars, there's always the point in time where each generation stops liking Star Wars. My brother-in-law is like 15 years older than me. And so he says there's 2 good Star Wars movies, and then the teddy bears showed up. Because he was 10, 11, 12, whenever Star Wars came out. Loved it. by the time Return of the Jedi comes out, he's in high school, and all of a sudden there's teddy bears saving the day. So way back in the day, people were saying that was the bad one. That was 40 years ago. So when you say it's overrated, I think it's complicated. I grew up on Return of the Jedi. And so, and I was 1.5 when it came out. And so I just always accepted the teddy bears were part of the formula. I never was bothered by that. But with time, it's a very awkward structure because the first 40 minutes feels like a prologue episode before the actual plot kicks in, and the plot itself, very simplistic. It's like an episode of a TV show, except it's an epic battle with fulfilling these character arcs that elevates everything. But, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to criticize there, but also it has the best space battle ever in cinematic history in the Battle for Endor. And it's another Go Primitive story. So, yeah, but I would generally disagree. I think it's a little bit more nuanced. And somewhat, I don't even know how much it qualifies because it's always kind of been held as the weaker of the original three. So, I have a hard time putting it here. Okay. So I did get confused earlier when I was talking about, how Pulp Fiction, Shawshank were in here. I read 2 different articles back to back. And so my brain merged them all together. So that he did not pick on 1994. He just picked on Forrest Gump. And in the context, that does help his point a little bit that Forrest Gump is probably the weakest between Shawshank, Pulp Fiction, and itself. Final one on the list, Infinity War. What is the argument for Infinity War? What on earth? It's a fun movie, hugely entertaining, filled with action. Once the initial excitement wears off, the story isn't anywhere near as revolutionary as many audiences claimed. Well, was the argument that the story was the part that was revolutionary? I mean, it's a simple MacGuffin story. Who can get to the stones first? Like that, it's a straightforward plot line with a massive cast. And the part that made it interesting was the perspective that the person with kind of the arc and the journey is really the villain, and then the villain wins. That's not revolutionary, but it is interesting for a movie like this. Might be bigger and bolder, but Infinity War still falls victim to the excessive quipping and lack of real emotional stakes that often bring the MCU down. If you want to take issue with the quipping, I get it. I don't think I would agree. There's quips, but I thought a lot of it worked. But lack of emotional stakes. I think you're picking one of like 3, 4 MCU movies that I don't think you can make that argument at all. Gamora gets taken, and they're desperately trying to find her, and they can't save her. And Star-Lord has a meltdown that causes everything to collapse. Like, there's personal stakes that happen in the movie. That there's actions have consequences. It's the one of the few that truly has emotional stakes. It's one where you can't make that argument. One of our Guardians just dies. And then, of course, you have the end of the movie where half the universe dies. And, well, we always knew they were going to come back. I don't know what your point is. Like, there's still something that happened. It's still devastating. It still took incredible work to, they have to go through this incredible journey to undo it. And seeing Robert Downey Jr. holding Tom Holland as he goes, "I don't feel so good, Mr. Stark." I'm good at impressions. There is so much emotional weight to that. It means something. It's significant. They failed. The bad guy won and the heroes lost. Or just everything that happens to Vision and watching Scarlet Witch kind of start to emerge from Wanda as like the rage shows up because of all of it. Rocket losing Groot. So I think like the idea that there's so many MCU movies, you can argue there's a lack of emotional stakes, but you picked one where that does not actually apply. So it's a movie simply adored for what it is, and it's not what it actually does. I just don't. I think you're not every movie has to have like this super layered, complex story to be interesting and layered. Infinity War is layered because there's so many moving parts. The plot has to be very simplistic because the cast is huge and all these plot lines are merging together. So the simple story is, let's grab the stones. Who gets the stones first? Very simple plot. But it's layered because all these different people bring all the past movies into the film. Past relationships, past character arcs. That's where the depth and nuance comes from. So I so hard disagree with this one. Of course, Infinity War is my favorite MCU film. So I, of course, was going to have a lot of issues with that one being declared a movie that nobody loves, because I love the film. But also, I just, saying it has no real emotional stakes, I just so utterly, fundamentally gotta disagree hardcore with that statement. Both, as other people pointed out, Infinity War is motions like saying ice cream isn't cold. Like, right. It doesn't add up. Half the universe dies. But beyond just like the big scope, because when things that are massive happen, they're so big that sometimes you lose the emotion because it's so big it becomes distant. But it's also personal. Before that, there's these very emotional moments and sacrifices and choices and loss and death. And when something gigantic happens, they pause to have people disappear in people's arms. So, totally disagree. That's my take on his list of most overrated movies that everybody pretends to love. That was kind of fun, like I said, because he follows me on Twitter, so it'll be interesting to see his reaction to my reaction to his article. Most of these clips are pulled from my Patreon live streams. I do about 6 live streams every single month for $2 per month, $20 per year. You can get access to all the exclusive videos and live streams for $5 per month. You get your name on my end card. At the top tier, you get a 30-minute video chat with me each month. The link down below in the description has more information.